Hey, I'm Chris Eishin. This is the Modern Dad Council. Joining me today is Jay Forty of the Greatness Zone and ReadyForLife.me, and Eric Lehman of the Game Changer Movement. Welcome, gentlemen. Today we are, the Modern Dad Council meets to discuss important issues around parenting, relationships, and everything else in the world around being a modern dad. And today we're talking about emotions. So emotions being, as men, as dads, is it okay to cry? Is it okay to feel those emotions? Do we always have to be the strong one? There to be the rock for everybody to lean upon. And so really, I just wanted to talk about that and see what your guys' perspective were on your emotions and how you handle them, and when you kind of lose control, your emotions take over. How do you kind of reassess the situation, I guess, and say, wow, was that a good thing for me to do, or is that a learning experience? Thoughts, feelings, Eric, Jay?
Emotions.
Yeah. What emotion rises in you when you think about emotions?
I think that the biggest thing that comes to mind for me is, are we aware of our emotions, or do they just kind of blurt out? And I think to become more aware that we have them, and that sometimes the ones we have do not serve us well, and we should be able to not use those or choose not to use those. So I think the biggest thing that I think of with emotions is, do we mean them, or are we uncontrolled in them? So are we reacting or responding, I guess, Chris, in our language before. And
Right.
that it's still a dad's responsibility to manage their emotions. It doesn't mean don't have them, but it means be in control of them, which means allow yourself to be sad and to be disappointed, and some of the other emotions that sometimes the stories we play in our heads about what a dad is supposed to be and do and how they're supposed to act, we don't condone those. We do anything but do them. So I guess the first thing that, like I said, that comes to mind for me is not that we don't have them, but can we identify when we do, and then choose to have them versus default to either keeping them away or just going, losing your control and smacking your kids. And so all of that just needs a little bit of tempering, I think.
Right.
Well, I just, I'm a wear your heart on your sleeve kind of guy, and
Yep.
and I remember specifically, and I know we've had a conversation about this before, where I talk to my kids about what I do when I'm angry, because one of the things that I try to share with my kids with intention is that anger is not a bad emotion. Making decisions from a place of anger is not the best place, to make decisions from. And so I remember sharing that, like, I told my kids that when I was angry as a kid, and I was going through a lot of really heavy stuff, one of the things that my adopted parents had me do was go split wood, and I cried, and I envisioned other people's heads where the wood was, and that was how I healthfully, dealt with my anger. And so I shared that story with my kids, and then one day when my 10-year-old was 9 or 8 or something, and she got angry, it was the most adorable thing, because she got really upset, and she just stormed out of the house in the moment. And I felt that I knew exactly where she was gonna go, and I look out the window, and there she is in the backyard at the woodpile with a huge splitting maul in her hand. And although there was a rule that sort of said no splitting wood, without a parent around, I was able to watch her, from afar. So it all worked out, but it was just I feel like having intention around emotions is a really huge opportunity as a dad, and to say, I I know that anger is a valid emotion, just like sadness, just like, you know, any other emotion, and I choose to release it this way. And one of the promises that I've tried to live into and have been mostly successful at is making sure that the emotion that I display matches the moment that I'm in, rather than taking, you know, emotion and angst from other moments, the buildup of stuff, of like residual stuff. So, you know, and I've got a lot of residual stuff, you know, and I split wood today, true confession, you know, and that was, you know, such a beautiful release compared to, you know, what it could have been if released with a person. So I feel like perfect timing. Thank you so much, Chris, for, you know, having this be the topic of conversation. Because I feel like we're also entering into a time where it's back to school time. We're in the hustle and bustle of schedules, and like this is where we get to be less than perfect. You know, this is where a lot of stuff just hits the fan in a way that the summer was so different. And maybe it's vice versa. Maybe the summer was the time where people were like, what do I do with these kids? They're always around, and like, you know. But for me, it's like, you know, now I'm transitioning from, you know, like carting the kids to different things with less rigidity to like, oh, I need to get them from here to here, and dance starts this and that, and then there's this curriculum night thing here, and should I go? And, you know, there's a lot of room for error, which whenever error happens, that's when emotions get to show up as well, you know. So so I feel like there needs to be a place to make room for imperfection, so that the emotions of the moment get to be the only ones on the table. But just to complete the thought, like my favorite times with my kids are when they watch me laugh, cry. You know, when we used to watch Undercover Boss together, and there was just like this arc of the show where like all of the generosity and kindness started showing up, and I would just start crying, and like, you know, my kids would just, it's almost like a drinking game but for kids, you know, like, when's dad gonna laugh, cry? And so anyway, that's what's real and alive for me, you know, in this part of the conversation now.
Well, I'm glad you went there with it, because I was gonna say, for a minute there it sounded like the focus on emotion was the negative emotion, or being upset or angry or whatever, but it's also, you know, how do we handle our joy too? You know, oftentimes, you know, it's like, oh, I got a raise at work, and then you go and you spend it, you know, to celebrate the fact that you got this raise, or whatever the case is, right? So it's like, how do you take those good times and express those in a healthy way as well, right? So I don't know. I didn't want it to just be about, you know, like, oh, what do we do as dads when we're mad, but also what do we do when we're with our kids, and how do we share with our kids how to handle emotion too. So one of these guys, Gary Parks is his name, and he's kind of an emotional coach, and so his job is professionally he coaches professional athletes. And so it's all about wrapping their head around the fact that when they hit that home run, they shouldn't be like so caught up in the moment that they hit a home run and that they're celebrating, but that they should expect that. When they go up to bat, expect that they're going to hit a home run. And then if they don't hit that home run, what do they do next time to improve so that they do hit that home run? And just kind of changing their perspective on it a little bit about how they go into situations can help them handle the outcome, whether positive or negative, in a different way.
I think, Chris, I think what they're doing there is, you know, detaching from the emotional charge of the event.
Right, there you go.
Because it gives them this net neutrality that allows them to see it just for information, and from the information you can decide what you want to do next better. And that way you don't get too euphoric if it's good and too upset if it's bad. And I think the difference for us is that we almost as dads need permission to attach some emotion to our things, because in many times we're too detached, because everything we've heard about being a dad is, that from an emotion side, positive or negative, manage it, keep it under wraps. And I think my thinking of being aware of what it is ties in what Eric's talking about. In fact, Eric, I love your line. In fact, I wrote it down: match the emotion with the moment, rather than bring in all the junk from another moment that doesn't have any place in this one. So that you could be angry with your kid because yesterday he got a C on his report card, and today now you're still angry, versus it has nothing to do with this particular moment. So the awareness of how do I want to be in this moment to show up really present to my kids allows me to not be victimed to I can't have any one of these. That the awareness to it isn't that I detach from it, but I allow myself 100% availability to any emotion that I need to be really present for my kids. And
so you feel it, recognize it, and allow it to pass.
Yeah, so as the sports guy maybe trying to detach from it because it affects performance, I think we need to attach, but not attach in a negative way, but become aware. Maybe that's it, not attach, but aware of it, in that 100% of the emotions that are out there are ours to choose from, rather than, as a dad, we don't get to play in this arena. So, no sad stuff, anger's fine, very little joy. Some of the stereotype of the quintessential male John Wayne type people, that this is what dads are supposed to do. So we could throw that away and say, let me at least see what I'm feeling. Let me allow myself to feel what it is now. How do I display that here? How do I connect in with it here? Because any one of these emotions is fine. And does it, in fact, serve me as I'm going in it? Like Eric said, it's fine for me to be upset. But if I make a decision from that place, then what may come next isn't that good. Or if I'm overly sad about this at the moment, then the decision that may come from it may let me do something for the kid that, based on our family's values, that's not what I want for them. So the awareness of that I'm experiencing it, but what do I need to experience in order to make a sound decision at the same time?
Welcome, Thomas. We're talking about emotion, and so you got to hear a little bit of Jay's thought on emotion. Do you have anything that kind of comes up for you when you think about your role as a modern dad and the emotions that you feel and how you kind of relate that to your children?
Sure. I think being a father is a massively emotional experience. I think we're always feeling emotions. We're feeling love, we're feeling concern, we're feeling frustration, we're feeling joy, we're feeling fear, just all of these things that we feel about our kids and for our kids and around our kids. And to me, the question is, how do we handle those emotions? Because our kids grow up to handle emotions the same ways that we do. So if there's a difficult or challenging situation and we panic, we're teaching our kids to panic in a challenging situation. Whereas if we handle it more calmly, or we have a better, more helpful way of dealing with it, then that's what we're modeling for them. So I want my kids to experience the emotions. I don't want to shut down the emotions that challenge them, that they can't always process and that do eventually erupt into some kind of frustration, but I want to teach them how to handle those emotions. So one example I can think of is when my younger son wants something from me. He loves apps on his phone, so he'll ask me, can I have he calls it a 0.99 or a 1.99. Can I have a 0.99 or a 1.99? And sometimes I'll say yes, and sometimes I'll say no. And when I say no, he starts to negotiate with me. Can I please? Can I this? Can I do this? And there's a whole, dance around whether we're going to get this thing or not. And it becomes not about the 99 cents, but about either sort of holding the line as a parent or budgeting or teaching him something. So what I've recently discovered with him is to say, look, I understand that you're disappointed that you can't have this thing. Instead of negotiating with me, please express your disappointment. Please tell me how you feel. I'm sad that I can't get this. I'm frustrated. I'm mad at you, whatever it is. And then I can join him in that emotion. I can say, you know, James, I'm disappointed too that you can't have this right now. I feel bad about that with you. And then we're together instead of locked in this emotionally charged argument where he's saying, I want this, and I'm saying no. So that's just one sort of thought about taking emotion to a different level.
I love that. I mean, that I think is the big undoing, you know, of this head-to-head conflict that we get in with our kids all the time. That if I can step into your space for a minute and share that space with you, I can, first of all, show you I'm interested, and secondly, you know, the two of us are now not on opposite sides. We're on the same side. It doesn't change the answer, but how I respond and how I show up to it is really, really different. I love that. I'm going to use that. That's terrific.
Well, yeah, that like pops up this idea of entrepreneurship, like that I have and that I try to instill in my kids, and so it's like, well, if you want that, let's think of some cool, creative ways that you can earn that, you know, and so it's not coming out of my pay or however that works. But yeah, that's like so many opportunities when you can step into that space instead of just saying no. Why not? Because we don't have the money, or because I said so.
Right.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
No, I think the big challenge for us is, you know, we still don't have a guidebook for as dads on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And
should we start writing one?
No, I don't think there should be one. You know,
So let's turn it into a 199.
Yeah, yeah, right. I think maybe, you know, why can't we just say that every emotion that's out there is available to us to choose at the right moment, and instead of, you know, true men or real men do that. Wasn't that the expression? Real men don't eat quiche. I think that was
Right.
the expression, right?
Right.
So, but what is it that real men do or don't do? And what we want to do is, how about a present man or a modern man considers everything that's available to them so they show up fully to the experience of the moment. And in that, could we be wise enough to know how to handle the emotion, but that allowing ourselves to be part of it could introduce us to some parts of ourselves that maybe we've never seen before.
I think that's great, and you know, one of the things that we work on at the Good Men Project, by providing a lot of first-person articles about men involved in parenting and involved in life and relationships, is that there is no, well, a couple things. One, there is no one preset way to be a man. There is, as you say, Jay, this whole range of options and emotions and different ways of being present in the moment. And as long as your values are sound, you know, there's no right or wrong way to do it. But we also fight what we call toxic masculinity. This idea that men are not allowed to show emotion, that men can't show any type of weakness or, you know, any type of sadness or concern, that guys have to be tough and teach our kids to tough it out. So allowing our children to unlock and express their emotions by expressing our own, you know, and by feeling free to do that. You know, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, I don't like this, or even, you know, I'm confused, I don't know what to do in this situation, isn't necessarily a sign of being a weak father or a weak leader. To stop and say, well, you know, I'm not sure what to do. We need to think about this. We need to talk about this or figure it out. But I think fighting that stereotype of, you know, the kid falls down or he's hurt or something happens at school and he's crying, you know, listen up, tough it out, whatever. We've got to get past that as fathers and men, or else we're consigning our boys to a lifetime of miserable relationships because they won't know how to express emotion in their relationships.
So I have to ask you. I mean, I love that, but where's the fine line then, emotionally, so that we don't coddle that kid, but we allow them that sometimes when you fall, you're going to get hurt, and it's crying has a really cathartic approach to activating the systems in your body so that the healing will go on. You got to put a scab on that cut now.
Right.
And that's not going to happen by me doing it. So. So where is that we're not helicopter parents, where we've shifted entirely from no emotion to oozing emotion to a point where we flood our kids with it?
Well, I mean, I hear just, there's an opportunity in the middle, which is, breathe 3 times when, I mean, like I was talking about this with my partner last night, is when my kids were young and figuring out how to fall. One thing I did really, really right, and I can't say that I did a tremendous amount right, but the one thing I know that I did consistently right was I made sure to breathe 2 or 3 breaths between my child falling down and my reaction. So I would let them,
have theirs. Yeah.
If they hurt themselves enough to cry, then I would go run, but I wouldn't deny them their own experience of falling and getting hurt and choosing, what to express. So I think if I've witnessed other parents jump so quickly that their kids were sort of forced to cry. It was almost like
the parent. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like almost a reconditioned response. And even in the daycare that my former wife used to run, I sort of saw these parents who would, I mean, the joke was like they sort of pinched their kids on the way out the door so that they would feel that they were missed, creating codependence like at 5 years old, at 3 years old, So I feel like that my kids at least know that they are entitled to their own first expression of emotion, and then we get to figure out in the moment how to be there with them, and not with. And I think that's the difference between present parenting and servant parenting.
Mm.
So present means I'm here with you in this moment with you. I think servant parenting is, I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to experience your C on a test for you and let you know what that should feel like, So, I don't know. I mean, that's just my thought.
Well,
Well,
go ahead, Jay.
That to me, that's the helicopter parent, though. That one of the things that I know that my thought is we should be aware of as parents is, are we in fact pinching the kid like Eric talked about? Are we so determined to make sure this kid is always thinking about us that we forget that our job is to help them, wind them up, and send them on their way rather than tether them to us? And I think emotional dependence is, you see parents sometimes play the drama role where they should get the Emmy for the performance, and all that they're doing is trying to keep the kid feeling responsible or tight or something to fill in some emotional gap that the parent has. And again, the awareness part of this is, am I doing that? Am I overly concerned? I noticed that on my former wife too. When she was around the kids, she was so ready to make sure their lives, they would fall on pillows rather than on anything hard, that the kids didn't have any idea that there was tar on the road. Why are we not driving on pillows? It just, the sense was I just wanted so much to protect you to make sure you're fine. When in fact, that's why, Eric, I love that. How am I a parent with you, or helping you experience that, whatever just happened, instead of me doing it for you or making you feel it. I can be so worried for you that you don't really feel any pain for what happened, but you feel my worry, and that's why you're crying. And parents can step into that. So to me, I'm back to the check in on your emotion. Where is it coming from? Is it about you? Is it about them? Are you too tight to them? Are you too loose to them? And I don't know the answers to these, but I think they're fair questions we should ask ourselves. in watching what it is we do and how we relate to our kids. Sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that was really well said. I'm kind of like, yeah, right on. So you kind of took the words out from me. Beautifully said. Thomas or Eric, do you have anything to add to Jay there? Because I'm kind of at a loss. So I'm gonna turn it on you guys.
Well, I mean, and I feel like just to say more about what it means to be present, I think I'm working on getting present to the point where I don't say, what would a good dad do? I'm present to the point where I would say, what would I do? Like, regardless of the, job description or my resume as a dad, is like, I have a heart. I'm connected with someone else who has a heart. And how would I show up in that moment with that other being who I care so deeply about? And so if I stop worrying about what a good dad would do and I just get into the moment, then I'm no longer dealing with all the other baggage of those thoughts, and I just can say, this is what one heart would, how another heart would show up with another heart. And I mean, it just keeps on coming back to that word with. It's just, we're in this together. It's almost arbitrary that we get to play the role of daddy, in some regards. And I think that's the sort of, not oxymoron, but like this interesting concept of the modern dad. The modern dad may be a titleless job, We're a person, we're a humanist rather than a fatherist, and we get to steward, not necessarily raise or instill, we get to steward these other beings, while they're with us. And so if we think more about stewardship than like even fatherhood, there's a lot to be said for that. So
I kind of had an example of exactly what you're talking about, Eric, kind of come up for me as you were sharing that, because I was like, well, that kind of relates to how I dropped my daughter. Okay, so she's in first grade, and I like to take her into the school and drop her off at her classroom. Now, there's a way of doing that to where you're like a helicopter parent, that you don't trust the fact that your child will be able to safely make it through the parking lot and into the building without holding your hand. And that's not why I do it. But I do it as a way of like connecting more with my daughter. To me, it's like, hey, let's walk in the school together, and while we're doing so, we're having a conversation, we're playing a game, we're doing, there's some sort of interaction with her taking place during that time frame. And then when we go in there, it's like I let her do her stuff, but I'm just kind of in the moment with her while she's getting ready for her day. And then I like to just say, all right, well, have a great day, and I'll see you when I pick you up. And then it's the same thing when I pick her up. I'm there to kind of be like, so I can say goodbye to her friends. So I'm more involved with, I don't know, more engaged with like the kids in her class and with her. And it's more about being present than necessarily being that helicopter parent to where it's like, I got to make sure she's safe and that she can do this. To me, I look at it as like a special time that I get to share with her, as opposed to a security thing, if that makes sense.
Do you find you have to justify that? I mean, I heard that a little bit, like there's something you have to explain because some other parent would look at you and say, wow, your kid can't do this by themselves. I mean, I just wonder if that was going through, because sometimes that stuff plays in our head,
Well, yeah, and yes and no. So, like, part of me is kind of, let me switch this video because it's showing. Part of me is like, I feel like I should let her off at the door. But at the same time, it's like she's in first grade, she needs to do this on her own. But at the same time, I really enjoy that time walking in with her, seeing the other kids, and that the interactions that we have. Because I don't make dropping her off to her classroom always about her. It's more about being part of that community, if you will. So for me, I do it for more than that, but there is a part of me that thinks maybe I should just leave her at the door and have that detachment, because I don't want to be that helicopter parent. So it's a little bit, Jay, it's a little bit of putting that mirror up to myself and saying, why are you really doing this? Are you doing it because you're that helicopter parent, or are you doing it because it's a moment for you to really bond with not just your daughter, but the other kids in the community?
Can I ask you, and I throw it out to the other dads too, about a word that you used. When you use the word should, my thinking is that means someone else has guided you to do this. When you say want to, then you did. So I should leave her off here is because the guidance is, or parents who are releasing their kids do that, therefore I should do it. So I just want to know whether you think that's true or not, or if that's just playing in my head. So the should tells me that I'm listening to some other voice. You know, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means I should seatbelt my kids in. Okay. Versus I want to. All right, that one I get. There's studies out there that say, hey, there's a greater chance I'll protect my kid if they're seatbelted in. But I should be there when they come out, because other dads will say, what's wrong with you? Or the teacher will say, that's not right. Or that there's some other reason. And could we want to do it so that our own voice and our own choice of parenting is there? Maybe I'm making more of it than it is. So I just throw it out there and see what you think.
I think should is kind of a loaded word. That's right. It's someone else sort of judging and saying this is the way to do it, you know, or this is my way to do it, and you really, you know, should be doing something different. We try to avoid it in titles and subheads of the Good Men Project because we try not to be prescriptive in our writing. And so I think it is actually a good idea to try to avoid it wherever we can. But that does bring up the question, you know, how do we make a definitive statement? Because sometimes we need, as fathers, as parents, you know, to make a definitive statement that really doesn't leave wiggle room or isn't wishy-washy. But that word should does carry that sort of
someone else is talking.
Someone else is talking, right? So I guess it comes back to what you were saying, Jay, being present and maybe putting it more, you know, instead of saying you should do your homework, maybe put it into an if-then. If you don't do your homework, you're not going to get good grades. If you don't get good grades, you're not going to succeed in school, whatever it is, rather than the should statement.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and I think it would be, you know, just, I know that the title of this show is emotions, and here we are again in our heads and, like, you know, defining things and talking about the word should, and, you know, this is a really ripe opportunity for us to even share, like, you know, when was the last time that each or any of us cried with our kids, or, you know, expressed an emotion with our kids, and, you know, can we share that, and what does it feel like to share that? Because I know that I'm in this, you know, new dynamic of a family where I'm way more expressive than I've ever been, than I was when I was in the 5-person household with my former wife, and so now I'm getting feedback from the kids that says that I shouldn't, there's that word again, I shouldn't share too much of my adult feelings with the kids, or thoughts with the kids, and I don't even know what that means.
The kids say that, Eric?
I mean, that's what I'm hearing as feedback from the kids, you know, kind of through my former wife's mouth, you know, like, it's just a very interesting dynamic, and so I feel like, you know, I don't even know what that's pertaining to, but I know that I've hit a resonance that I really appreciate, and it's a really, really good thing. So yeah, I mean, I remember, you know, loving the idea of crying with the kids, and you know, watching Undercover Boss and all these different things. I don't even know what where the shouldn't is showing up. So like I probed to try to understand that more, but I'm just kind of curious, like if we can really share from a place of not like a manual, not prescriptive place, but just to share, like when was the last time we cried with our kids, or expressed emotion, or let our kids cry and made a safe space for it, and what was that like? So I don't know. I mean, it seems like an opportunity with this topic to dive in.
Yeah, I think the word "should," I think, shows up, yes, as an intellectual response, as permission to have an emotional response. Should dads cry in front of their kids? And if the kids have their own understanding of whether this is right or wrong, and Eric, maybe that's the case on your side, that your kids, for all the time they're with you, maybe that still is something in their definition of what a dad isn't playing out to the way it is. And I wondered if that turns into an opportunity to have a conversation with them about what their expectations about what a parent's emotions are. What's fair? What do they accept? What do their friends do? Not that that's for you, but that's their reality. And from that, are they uncomfortable when we're totally in our own emotions? And that just gives you information to how to be. It doesn't say don't be that. It says, okay, this one is a little bit thrown by that. What work do I have to do to help them tune into their own emotions? Because if they're uncomfortable with me being this way, they're probably uncomfortable with them being this way. What do I need to do? Where you may have 3 kids, 2 might be cool with you doing it, 1 might be not. Based on their own genetic makeup, they're less emotional. They're more intellectual, and this makes them feel funny. So then how are you present to that kid? Not saying that you can't be who you are, but this doesn't seem to work as well for that kid as the others.
I think it comes back to what it means to be present, and get still like plowing through that definition of what's a good dad, like what's a good, how does it mean to, to show up in this moment? And I mean, it's all situational, it's situational in the business world. It's situational. I mean, like, there are appropriate times to break down and cry in the business world. I can't really think of any right now, but when Sandy Hook happened, if I was in the business world, I would have totally broken down and cried. It's just like you sort of get a free pass. I was just at a conference last week when you guys, bared with me as I was driving to Rhode Island, and a person who was born as a crack baby, that's how he described himself, who shouldn't have amounted to anything, as he described to himself and the rest of the room. He now created this, amazing food truck that serves as both a community kitchen as well as a for-profit restaurant. And it was just like there was not a dry eye in the whole house, and every video taken of the audience showed tears, and it was almost unnatural not to cry. So those are the really great moments that we get to live into when we dive into our way of being. So I guess what I feel that the Modern Dad Council gets to do is break through all these shoulds of the generations of old, and just determine what it means to be a person right now, title aside. So.
One thing that came up for me a few weeks ago, one of these leadership conferences that I went to, is there, talking about your past and, having you think about things these emotions that you felt in the past that still come up for you, and then to focus on those emotions and to, like, really feel them. And I'm like, for me to go through this process, my natural reaction is to, okay, shut down, go numb, stuff those feelings, not to step into feeling them. And I found a lot of resistance for a whole day. Like, I'm talking like 8 hours of workshop geared to break you free of all of those emotions. And I had this wall up, and I was like, I'm trying to tap into that emotion, and I'm trying to feel, but it's like I couldn't bring myself to, like, truly be that vulnerable person and that vulnerable man. And it took me literally that whole day, and then the next day, probably half a day, before I really just let go and let the wall down. And that blew my mind, because it was one of those things that I knew that this was going to happen. Like, I was prepared for it. I was ready for it. It's like, I know there's things I've been holding on to that I just want to let go of, but it's like, how do I do that? And then I start analyzing it and overthinking it, and like, so then when the time comes, it's like, all right, Chris, it's time to feel. I'm like, I can't feel. I'm not a robot. And then, but I feel like I get, as a man, as a modern dad, I have different times in my life where I'm more susceptible to feel, and other times where I just close up. Or, when my grandma died, that was like, okay, my dad, my stepdad, is losing it, and I've never seen this man of all men, like, lose it like this before. And so I felt more of a need for him to be strong around him, and to be there and be that support, and be that shoulder to cry on him. And at the same time, I'm like, but I want to feel my emotion. I'm like, I can feel it later. Let me just be here for them right now and be strong for them. And so I guess my question, to kind of throw back at you, Jay and Thomas and Eric, is like, in those situations, how do you handle that? Like, when you find yourself, do you find yourself stuffing your emotions at certain times, and then like diving into really feeling it at other times? I don't know. What are
I think it's really hard, Chris, because I think that as children, we learn to suppress emotions at times as a coping mechanism. Something's overwhelming, something's difficult, there's a pattern, something unpleasant or uncomfortable that we're dealing with in our life, and so we turn it inward. We say, I'm not going to deal with this now, or I'm going to compartmentalize it, or, whatever it is, I'm going to cope with it in this way that works for me now, for my 8-year-old brain or my 12-year-old brain or whatever it is. And then we become an adult, and that coping mechanism is no longer valid. It doesn't serve us anymore, but we're still stuck in it. So that's why it can take time to, and why, at the event you're talking about, they have to sort of break it down. They have to get us to get out of that pattern and stop doing that. But to me, it is pretty much situational. And again, we keep coming back to what Jay said about being present. Being present in the moment, allowing yourself to feel that emotion, and then taking the pause or the breath and saying, what do I want to do with it? What's the best thing for me to do with this emotion right now? I feel intensely sad. Is it, and obviously sometimes it's just going to overtake you, but am I going to break down and cry? Is that where I'm going to go with this? Am I going to be the strong one for somebody else? Is that the best role for me to be playing right now? To actually, to the degree possible, make a conscious decision about it.
And what I learned growing up was, I don't know if I ever heard word for word the expression, "I'll give you something to cry about," but I feel like kinship with those words, and also a vow never to say that, and one of the things that I knew when I was like really young is that I was very much an empath, so if anyone in the room was crying, I was crying. If anyone in the next room was crying, or in the next room, I was crying, So like that's something that I actually learned how to turn off. And sort of for about 15 years of marriage, I was really stoic. And so to really share right now is that like I've opened the floodgates, literally as recently as last Monday, which was the 25-year anniversary of me getting kicked out of my house. And since then I've been a frickin' roller coaster, and I'm just like, I actually noticed, and this is the weirdest thing I'm going to share that I didn't know I had the ability to do, but I actually learned that I have the ability to cry in my left eye only, so that I could be driving and crying at the same time and not have my kids see that I'm bawling, on my right side, when they're watching me drive. So that was the most amazing observation that I think I've ever had about my own, emotional release process. But yeah, so, I've gone from empath to stoicism back to empath, and like, oh boy, So I apologize in advance if I just randomly start crying.
I expected that of you, Eric. Which is one of the reasons I was so blessed to have you on today's show, because I know how well tapped into your emotions you are, and we talked about this I think yesterday. Is how you just wear them on your sleeve. It's like you're feeling it and you want to talk about it, you want to get it out there. So I appreciate you being open and sharing. And it's like right now I've got lawnmowers going past my window. We got phones going off with somebody else's. You gotta love technology in the world.
Sorry, I thought I turned it off. It's the fax machine ringing, but I can't
you're
turn
all
it
right.
off anymore.
It is what it is, but no big deal. I just for me, go ahead, Thomas. Did you have to say something you wanted to say? No. Oh. For me, Eric, it's like I want to be more like that, like being that tapped into my emotions and more, being able to just like express it at the moment. But it's a practice for me. It's a practice for me to be really present of those emotions, because for so long I thought I had to be that rock or that the man, right? So that's another reason why this show I thought was so important to talk about, is because as men we don't share our emotions. We don't tend to talk about feelings, and good is along with bad. So when we're pissed off, go chop wood, go beat up a punching bag, do something like that. But when you're feeling, on high, what's another way to kind of take that emotion and have it, instead of going through these big peaks and valleys, how can we kind of like tamper our emotions so that when we're feeling low, we can reach out to a moment where we felt really good and kind of bring ourselves back down to balance. Not that necessarily, I guess, when you're feeling really good, you want to find a time where you're really sad to bring you back down, but
yeah, no, they'll show up on their own.
Right. Well, I think what you bring up is, when I talked about being stoic, like what I did intentionally was, because I had so much anger from the years of my youth, that I didn't fully express, and I didn't split enough wood, because I'd still be splitting wood, day in and day out, at least I would think so. So, what I did was I actually cut off the highs and the lows, like the highest highs and the lowest lows. I just prevented myself from feeling, and I actually lived into a different Eric because living into the emotionally, empathic Eric it was too hard. Like, these 8 days, like I need to drink gallons of water just to keep up with stuff, with both my sweat from splitting wood and my tears from crying at the left side, like what the heck is going on, so like, and for me, I guess I'm an extremist, it's either I'm all emotion or none, and I don't know how to, like, if I'm supposed to find the happy middle, who knows about that one.
Well, sometimes it all just floods out, Eric, and sometimes experiencing a particular kind of sadness or sad event will trigger our emotions that relate to other similar events that we experienced in the past. So, I remember a long time ago when I worked in book publishing, I had a boss, and she had a second baby, and the baby died at a month or two old or something. It was just so horribly sad. And going to the funeral and seeing the little coffin, I mean, it was sad, but like being so overwhelmed with sadness and grief and crying uncontrollably, and then talking to somebody about it, not a therapist but a friend who explained to me, seeing that it brings up your dad's funeral when you were 9. It brings up every experience of that type of grief that you've ever gone through, and so sometimes we just get flooded with that kind of emotion, and it's like, I can't stop it. Where's it coming from? It's just a wave.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, Thomas, because I was talking about that experience at that leadership conference, and that whole first day, nothing. The second day was halfway through, but when that hit, it hit like a waterfall. It's like I was dehydrated. I lost my voice. I mean, I was done for. Oh man, but and then crying, the amount of energy that takes, I always thought, a man, holds in his emotion. Dude, it takes so much more energy to just let it out. When you're done having a good cry, you need to have a good nap because you're pretty exhausted.
Well, I mean, maybe that's where we should make the guide. Okay, let's pick, Sunday early afternoon, we're gonna have National Daddy Let the Tears Out Day, mm-hmm. and then you get to nap and lie down and watch a little football.
And I think it's mandatory on that day that everybody listens to Harry Chapman's
Chapin, like Cats in the Cradle.
Yeah, Cat in the Cradle song.
Yeah, that one will get you.
Every time. I don't care what I'm doing. That song comes on, boom.
No.
But, and there's a certain amount of stress relief too because I tend to stuff my emotions down, right? So I feel something, instead of saying something and voicing it, my natural reaction is to just stuff it down. I'll deal with that later, kind of a thing. So the freeing feeling that you feel when you can just let it out and just take my emotions from me. Take that sadness, take that joy, and stepping into that and really feeling it. It's a pretty powerful experience. But I think we're getting close to the 2:00 hour, so I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to jump in and make one last comment to emotion, and then we'll wrap it up. So does anybody want to jump in and have one last comment? No? All right.
Well,
cool.
I just want to appreciate, I feel that this is a real groundbreaking episode, because I feel like we're on the fringe. We're talking about a topic that is not the the regular. I mean, I participated in a men's group for 8-9 years so that I could have a place for my emotions, because it's clear that quote unquote society doesn't have a place for us, for our fluid expression of our emotions. And given the dehydration conversation, fluid means so much, and so anyway, I really appreciate you pushing us out there with this topic. And it's ironic that this is one of the episodes where I haven't cried. So thank you.
I think the thing about emotions for us as dads is for us to be aware that we can have them and should have them, and then just be present enough to them to know how they serve us. That we shouldn't. So there's the word should. so that we're aware to say, here's what I want to be part of, and then to be present enough to it to say, if I stay like this, then this particular emotion's not going to serve me well, or this one is serving me really well. Let me stay with it. But I get, like I said before, the full 360-degree range of emotions are all for me, not just this one little piece of pie that says, okay, these are men's emotions, all the rest are for women, and you don't step into it. But all of it is ours. But that we then have to use it wisely, like everything that we have to do. That we mean it, choose it, instead of just say, oh, it's here, let me just go with it.
Yep. And I want to share my emotion that I'm feeling today, and that's gratitude. I'm really grateful for you guys giving me the opportunity, to have a show like this where we can talk about these things. And I want to thank, our viewers for watching and, being interested enough to step up and, I don't know, listen to what our thoughts are and share their own. So thank you guys. We'll see you guys next week. So thank you so much.